Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, A Blueprint for Content ROI, 3 ways to maximize the value and impact of your content investments. I'm Sal Osoro, I'm publisher of Demand Gen Report, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. For those of you who may be new to Demand Gen Report, we are an online media company publishing daily news, weekly email newsletters, special reports, original research, and a rich menu of additional resources. If you haven't done so already, I recommend you join more than 60,000 of your peers and subscribe to Demand Gen Report today. In addition to publishing Demand Gen Report, we also produce the premier event in B2B marketing. It's each February in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's called the B2B Marketing Exchange. This is a 3-day event. It's actually February 24th through the 26th, as you see. It focuses on helping professionals improve their B2B marketing and sales strategies and results. It's rated a top B2B marketing conference by Forbes each year, and B2BMX brings more than 1,300 marketers together for 3 days of educational and networking. That includes more than 100 sessions through 6 topical tracks, including channel marketing, demand generation, content, digital strategies. We really have it all. You can learn more about this unique event and register to attend at b2bmarketing.exchange or, as you see, b2bmx.co. Throughout this event, we're hosting a special sweepstakes where attendees have a chance to win some awesome prizes from our SPS 19 prize pack. Registrants will automatically be entered for a chance to win. And every session you attend will have some great prizes this year. We have Withings Move Hybrid Smartwatch, which I'm not even sure what it is, but it sounds great. Apple AirPods. I had mentioned earlier that I have bought quite a few of those for my kids. We often wash them. I find them in the wash because they don't take them out of their pockets. So you'll be getting one as well. A Microsoft Xbox One S and free passes to the aforementioned B2BMX. We'll be choosing one winner per day. So be sure to attend as many sessions as possible for your chance to win. As you see, today we are using the On24 platform, and during the presentation, you can access all the information you need in the platform toolbar. During and after today's presentations, please follow along and share your thoughts and feedback on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag SPS19. For your convenience, you can tweet directly from the On24 platform here by using the Twitter widget on the left-hand side of your screen. And we also like to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them at any time. You can use the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's presentation is slated for 30 to 35 minutes with about 10 minutes for Q&A right afterwards. And for those who are dying to know, we will be recording the session, and we'll make sure that all the attendees receive an archive link so you can go back, review at your leisure, share with your colleagues, really just get a chance to enjoy it. In addition to joining the conversation online and submitting questions, we also welcome you to let us know how we're doing. We obviously want to constantly improve the level of events that we provide you, so we put together a brief survey that will automatically launch once the webinar ends. But if you're like me and just can't wait to fill out that survey, you can access the survey at any time in that little bottom box there. Again, we do appreciate your feedback, and it definitely does help us. So now to the good stuff. The speakers. Very pleased to introduce today's speakers. And this is an extra bonus for me because they're 2 of my good friends, Alicia Esposito and Tanya Venice. Alicia is the senior content strategist for G3 Communications. She's our family of brands, including Demand Gen Report, content for demand and retail touchpoints. In her role, she oversees the content and editorial strategy of these brands across all properties, including events. She also helps company partners and clients with their content strategy and creation efforts, and has a passion for crafting immersive and relevant content experiences using new approaches to storytelling, interactive formats, influencers, and more. I had to read that, so I can't lie. I had to read that one. And then Tanya. Tanya is the director of content strategy at Content for Demand. And as the director of content strategy, she oversees the agency's team of content strategists and works across content creation and delivery functions to ensure on-point quality content services. She has more than 20 years of experience in the B2B content development and formerly worked as a business and news journalist. So Tanya and Alicia, welcome. And with this, I'm going to move the slide over and pass it over to, I believe Alicia is going to be joining us first.
Thanks, Sal. And I don't know about anyone else watching, but I think we should have you just give reviews of the latest tech or maybe do an audiobook or two, because that was beautiful.
Well, thank you, Alicia. I appreciate that.
Tanya and I are really happy to be here. I know that the topic we're talking about today is something that is extremely relevant with all of our clients, with all marketers, I think, because we're facing a crisis, right? As the slide says, we got 99 problems. And a few of those are we have less time, we have fewer resources, and we need to move faster than ever without risking the quality and basically the innovation that we bring into the marketplace as part of our brands or as part of an agency. We're setting a higher standards for ourselves as marketers, but we are in a crunch for the time and resources we need to create these high quality campaigns and experiences for our buyers. So needless to say, we're feeling a lot like this guy, right? Day in and day out, we're just chugging away. We're essentially on the hamster wheel, trying to create that fantastic content that not only captures attention and eyeballs, captures is kind of a harsh word, but really brings in the reader, brings them into our story. We create that empathy, that connection, and ultimately forge those relationships that drive tangible business value. So at the end of the day, we have a tall order to deal with, and we have high expectations. We're being held accountable for the decisions we make as marketers. Every single creative decision we make, there is a comparison to, is this driving actual revenue or bottom line benefits for our business? So needless to say, work-life balance just doesn't exist. We're always thinking about the next great content idea. We're always thinking about the next campaign. And in addition to that, rolling to-do list, we have a slew of those last-minute needs and demands from our team as they emerge. But what we found over the years, working at Content for Demand, working with a variety of different brands across industries and even sizes, is that we kind of have this this power tricycle, right? These three wheels to success that includes proper planning, process, and now more than ever, agility. And when used together, when used effectively, they really pack a powerful punch. So our goal today is to really call out these strategies and best practices that we've uncovered over the years and in our work with a variety of clients. These tactics not only make our lives easier, they drive actual results. So with that, I'm excited to dig in to these strategies. The first one being modular content. And I'm sure a lot of the folks listening today have heard the term modular content or modular strategy. And that's because it really is such a tried and true process from a content strategy perspective. I think it just comes down to a few key questions. How do we get started from a planning perspective? And how do we make this a day-to-day practice? So as those last-minute needs emerge from within our team, we can be nimble or scrappy. We're hearing a lot in the marketplace, scrappy marketing. How can we be more swift in our content creation efforts? And modular content really is the heart of making that a reality. And, there are a few ways to tackle that. Of course, top down. And as you can see, always sunny in Philadelphia, the maps, so to speak, having one core topic or pillar ebook. And, you can easily branch that out into a lot of follow-up pieces. We use foundational or big rock ebooks as a really core component to a modular strategy just because they're so rich and they can include so many different components. So as you can see, it's about designing a piece from the beginning to be broken down. So that means having case study callouts. It means using a lot of data throughout the piece so you can easily pull them out and turn them into an infographic or a social image series. or reframing a best practice element, a checklist to success within the ebook, turning that into a blog. So again, using that foundational asset and branching it off into as many different follow-up pieces that create this little universe of content for your promotion and your amplification. Because at the end of the day, you're not always going to bring everyone to that core piece. There are going to be different routes to discovery across channels. The other approach, and this is the approach that we're helping a lot of brands take to tackle those last-minute needs as they emerge, and that's piecing together these smaller elements and seeing how we can bring them together to tell a more comprehensive story, through larger pieces. And this could mean, piecing together a series of blogs to turn them into a white paper. It could mean integrating videos into a case study portfolio. So this really is an opportunity for you to kind of use what you have in a lot of ways and really try and bring them together to tell a more comprehensive story. And I think the main thing as far as modular strategy goes is to think about, ways that you can tell a consistent story across all of these pieces and respin them and reframe them in as many ways as possible to maximize that reach and impact of that core brand message or that core brand story that you're trying to really get to market. So as far as an example that we see, that we've seen be really successful, NASDAQ has kind of been a shining star for modular strategy because we did a pretty long-term initiative with them. They had a lot of core white papers that they created in-house, and they essentially said, we wanted to get more mileage out of this. We want to drive more lead gen, want to drive more social sharing, more interest. Help us find the best way to do that in a way that is cost effective and also efficient from a content creation perspective, because we only had so many conversations with SMEs. We really wanted to maximize all of that time and investment that we had up front. So really what we did is we packaged some of the core white papers together to create these pillar ebooks. And as I noted earlier, we designed these ebooks from the beginning to be broken down. And I think, when it comes to 2020 planning, having those foundational pieces to drive your narrative editorial calendar is going to be really critical to success, because you'll have that underlying story. And then again, it's just a matter of breaking it down. So as you can see in these samples of pages within, we designed them, again, to have a lot of different call-out sections. A page is broken down into 5 ways. The sidebar in the middle, in and of itself, could be extracted and reused for social or to be a mini infographic of some kind. So we collaborated really closely with our design team to ensure all of these pages had the most possible value, not only in terms of engaging the reader, but, the best way to reuse and respin it. So after the ebook, we actually extracted a page and fleshed out the story a little bit and created a tactical checklist. Again, it was how can we create follow-up pieces as quickly and efficiently as possible, and we were able to do that successfully just by reusing existing content and fleshing out the narrative. And we reused all of the data that we included throughout that Big Rock ebook and restructured it into a more high-level cyber threats by the numbers infographic, because we were targeting more C-level executives, members of the board. We really wanted to call out how cyber threats were impacting organizations of all sizes, and the role that the C-level and the board can play in driving that improved security and that governance, and how that ultimately impacts the business. So piecing all of that content together in one powerful story that was easy to consume was really important. So as you can see, 3 very different content formats, all told a very similar comprehensive story, but they were able to use them for those different channels in order to determine, what resonated the most with our audience, and ultimately it helped them maximize the potential value for their investment, just because we were able to try so many different things. And with that, this will bring us to the second way you can maximize content ROI, which is repurposing. And Tiny's going to dig a little bit into how some of these practices can be applied, but in a way where you can kind of respin and reimagine that story, that content for new formats and experiences. Tanya?
Thanks, Alicia. So I'm going to talk about repurposing, and a good place to start is to talk about considering the end-to-end experience. One thing you want to talk about is, what type of assets are you going to use? Static or interactive? Are you going to use linear, as in a nurture, or are you going to create a binge experience, perhaps in a hub? All of these can be outcomes of repurposing. And then how are you going to deliver and amplify the content? A key question is, how can you tell the same core story in a different way? And it's important to know that when you repurpose content and you get a cost savings, it's not necessarily because you're not going to pay for new assets to be created. What's going to happen, as Alicia said, is the timeline's going to shrink so you can work faster, and you are not going to have to do as much work to get core content inputs to create those assets. So I thought we would take a look today at one of my favorite stories of repurposing. And one of the reasons I love this story is because this group at Equifax was able to take a piece of content that was already being created quarterly, a 10-page trends report, and turn it into an awesome multi-touch nurture through repurposing. Just to note that they were the Finney winners for measurable ROI in 2018 at B2BMX. So if you come to the program, to the event that Sal was talking about in the beginning, you could simultaneously apply for a Finney Award with your great content. And perhaps this can, if you get some repurposing tips here, and you can put them into action. So what happened with Equifax was that they realized that one of their SMEs was creating this fantastic report every quarter, and it contained a lot of great content. They were able to base a 7-touch program campaign on this report, creating emails, social posts, blogs, webinars, and then a piece of takeaway content for webinar attendees. This has now become a repeatable process that they do every quarter to optimize this report. This was beneficial for them, not just because of the time savings and the money savings, because they didn't have to acquire research or other inputs for content, and they could produce formats faster, but they were also able to add more formats to their mix of content and bring in some top-level topics to talk to people about that they otherwise wouldn't have a platform to talk to use for that conversation. They were able to create to build up their blogging platform, to create flip books, and then with the webinars, drive more information to drive more viewers to their website. Some of the results of the campaign are confidential, but we can share some, and we can tell you that from the application for the Finney Award that this type of ROI was consistent throughout the campaign. They had more monetary opportunities than they anticipated at the end of the first campaign. They had more email open rates than they anticipated. Their webinar registrations were double what they thought they were, and attendance was nearly double what they thought they were going to get. So this was a very beneficial campaign for them. And another reason why I think this is one of my favorites is because I've gotten to know a lot of organizations really well after working with them on their content. And I think that there's a lot of unused SME content out there that could be fed into, repurposed as campaigns, whether this is internal presentations, external presentations, speeches. I would encourage everybody to not just call on their SMEs when there's sort of a push from marketing to fill in the blanks for these ideas that we came up with, but also tap your SMEs to find out what they're doing and what kind of ideas can bubble up into content, particularly, as I said, for top of the funnel. I wrote a blog for Content for Demand, 5 tips for engaging SMEs, and you can see that at contentfordemand.com in the blog section, but I thought I'd talk about 3 of the best ways to engage your SMEs. One is to choose the right SMEs. Choose ones that are easy to work with to make your life easier. Alicia pointed out why we all need that. Choose SMEs that respect your deadlines and understand the urgency that you're under and can make time in their schedule to meet your deadlines. And then finally, make sure you're working with somebody who really buys into your marketing strategy and goals and understands what content is for versus product brochures or product presentations. Number 2, help them become influencers. As a marketer, you can offer them a lot of platforms that they can use to raise their stature internally and externally. Blogs, podcasts, webinars, videos. Otherwise, they might not have access to these. You can also help them with social promotion and thus help your nurture campaign or whatever project it is that you're working with the SME on. And you can also help them by promoting them internally, pointing out in your internal newsletters and platforms what a great job this SME did. Finally, we've worked with clients that have concrete compensation for SME input. One client created a program where they were actually giving monetary awards on a quarterly basis to SMEs that came up with a certain number of ideas that ended up being used in campaigns. That worked nicely. You could also, perhaps if you're a small organization and you don't have money for monetary compensation, ask HR, can you get some days off that you can grant for SMEs that contribute a significant amount of time to marketing programs? You could also give them company gifts and promo items or hook them up to an event that they really want to go to. Perhaps cover their way there and ask them to write some blogs or come up with some content ideas while they're there. Finally, we're going to take a look at our 3rd idea, spin content for different audiences. And I am going to toss it back to Alicia to give some advice about this.
Thanks so much, Tanya. And I think this is a really fascinating tip or best practice because of how, when we plan content appropriately, how turnkey this reversioning process is. And I think it just speaks to the much larger reality that we're facing in B2B, that, the lines between B2B and B2C are continuing to blur. And that's why I have a picture of, a woman shopping for shoes, because there's that personalization that's so inherent in B2C. And that's starting to carry over into our professional worlds. We want to feel like the content that we're consuming is highly tailored to not just our job roles, but to our industries, the size of our company, even the committee that we have to navigate as we're trying to make buying decisions. The Demand Gen Reports Content Preferences Survey, has some really fascinating findings from this year that more and more buyers want content to be organized based on these parameters. And, that's especially true in the actual assets that they're reading as well. They want to feel like they're seen, they're known, and most of all that they're understood. But we all know it's not always feasible. It's not realistic for us to create all of these hyper-tailored assets from scratch, right? So we have to get a little smart about how we do that. And that's where reversioning comes in. And, usually when I make recommendations for reversioning, or when we go through the ideation process and we know up front that a client is, prioritizing, say, retail, hospitality, and restaurants, right? There are some nuances to how these organizations operate. There are different trends that are keeping them up at night, for lack of a better term. But there is a centralized story or a higher level story that can carry through across all of those industries. So that's why we try to prioritize low effort and high impact changes to content, again, because it helps squeeze that content creation time a little bit. It makes it a little shorter, more efficient. And it also helps ensure that we're telling a more consistent story for the brand or for the client, because that's really the most important thing, right? That they're going to market with this consistent story. So we try to offer a few quick hit opportunities and best practices when it comes to reversioning. Obviously, tweaking headlines and subheads, that's a low hanging fruit, right? Even if the bulk of the content is the same, even just making those subtle tweaks to the headlines shows that you're speaking to a very specific type of buyer, a very specific industry. Using industry-specific data for callouts. This kind of ties to why having a modular type asset is really valuable, because you can really easily extract components and add new ones in. And then case studies, again, same, you can present them through callouts, modular callouts. That switching process is very efficient. And as far as ways to really zero in on those key nuances of the industry, whether it be regulations, whether it be very specific trends, such as, say, the impact of Amazon, highly relevant to retail, maybe not so much restaurants, really try and include those in critical areas of the asset, highlight them or refer to them, so it's very easy for you to switch out those references or generalize them for specific industries. So this is a really great example from our sister brand Retail Touchpoints. It was a sponsored piece with a client, Certona, and they wanted to create a comprehensive buyer's guide for personalization technology for both B2B and B2C. So as you can see, different imagery for the cover, and slight tweaks to the headlines to make those distinctions for the specific type of company. Core design concept is the same, branding is consistent, but again, those little touches make a big difference. However, the most interesting is when you show the side-by-side comparison of just the first page, right? Again, core structure the same, core components, even the bulk of the content is the same. You just look at those data callouts, again, switched out to be more relevant to the specific industry. And even the copy changes are so subtle, but again, they make a big impact for the particular audience. So I wanted to spotlight this as an example because it just goes to show that you don't need to overhaul your assets completely. You don't need to do those line-by-line edits. You don't need to do a lot of, deep dive research to make it super, super tailored. And again, this is extremely effective when you get that last-minute request from, someone else on your team or from a different division saying, oh, hey, we got interest from X type of company. What type of content do we have? And you're kind of scratching your head or scrambling to get something off the ground. This is a great way to develop those foundational stories and find subtle ways to tweak so you can make it highly, highly relevant and engaging for your target audience. So those are the main three, but we would be remiss if we didn't bring in a bonus tip based on ABM, because obviously ABM has really taken the B2B world by storm. Brands are trying to figure out how to make a strategy that works best for their business. And I'm sure all of the marketers are like, oh, geez, another thing I need to do, more content I need to create, especially if you're targeting tens or hundreds of companies. How do you even do that at scale, right? So Tanya's going to share some awesome tips and real life examples to show that it's really not that hard. Tanya, take it away.
Thanks, Alicia. So limited tip here, but just to get you started, first, really, it all depends upon your strategy. And the thing about ABM that I find is that it's really not that different than everything else we're doing for content. It just needs to be really micro-prepared based on your target audience. And of course, that could be a one-to-one approach. So this is literally, I'm talking to one person or perhaps a couple of people on a buying group with this piece of content or this event or whatever it is. One to few. So this could be, we find that our clients often do this when there's a qualification. So you take an action in the first touch, and then if that qualifies you for a one to few, to receive something for a one to few touch in the next step. And then, of course, one to many. This previously would be simply verticalizing or perhaps different personalizing content for specific vertical roles. For example, a safety director across several different verticals. Once you understand what you're trying to accomplish, it's easier to decide what type of content you can repurpose from existing material. Just wanted to show 3 quick examples here. On the left, a one-to-one ebook. This was literally created out of existing SME information for a buying committee at one targeted client. One to few mailer. This is a direct mail that was a follow-up to qualification in the prior step in a nurture. And then one to many, what a great way to talk to different verticals with a bookmark. And this was followed up by a book that was sent to these recipients. If you can see on the bottom, there's a very kind of a symbol of retail and the closing of brick and mortar stores that we've been seeing, kind of reminiscent of VHS video rental stores. And finally, we have some final tips that Alicia's going to share with you.
Great. Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, so obviously we went through a lot of the foundational tips and best practices that we've found to be extremely successful for our clients that are looking to either A, do more with less, or B, get content to market faster across a variety of different channels. So obviously this is the first of a few steps in your process, and we're happy to have any follow-up conversations, answer any questions. So feel free to, as Sal indicated earlier, submit those in the Q&A area, or share your email with us so we can have a follow-up conversation. But to close things off, here are just a few quick tips to help you jumpstart your initiatives, get you a little inspired to act now. Of course, number one, the foundation of it all, always start with your objectives. I know this is kind of hard, when we're speaking about last minute needs, or, when someone barges into your office saying they need X, Y, Z. But if you're going to go to market with a very consistent content marketing plan or strategy, especially as we think about 2020. It's always good to have those core objectives in place, especially around the core narrative points or messaging elements you plan to focus on through your marketing activities. This will help you determine what big rock assets you should be creating. How will that be broken down into follow-up content? How can we create a big rock asset that will allow us to maximize the reach and impact of this story so we can follow that more modular type approach? So creating content doesn't have to start net new every time. It doesn't have to be a strain on our time, our resources, and of course our budget. Because when you have those core objectives in place, the next step is, taking a look at your existing content inventory. This is kind of the point where we preach the value of having a robust content audit, not just a list of assets and links, but getting into the nitty-gritty details of age, alignment to persona or buyer stage, even digging into how repurposable is this content? Can it be reversioned for different industries? Taking a hard look at this content and seeing if it is prime for this repurposing and reusing strategy, because that's going to be your target, right? That's going to be your priority if you decide to move forward and you say, okay, these are the assets that align to our story. How do we determine which content we can reuse and respin to meet our needs? And then that's where you pick your approach, right? Whether it be repurposing, making a static piece interactive, which we've done. We've actually shared a piece in the resources section of the platform, which I hope you click and enjoy. The experience is actually based on static content that we created. It performed so well for us. And a few years later, a lot of the core story was the same. We just refreshed some elements, combined two pieces together and made it interactive. So we basically brought two quote unquote dead assets back to life. That kind of outlines some of our approaches, and you can kind of see repurposing in action. And then if you decide to do modular strategy, this is where you start to develop the branches from your core asset, or vice versa if you plan to go bottom up. And finally, the most important point is always be agile. You may have a plan in place. You may have, your modular plan or your repurposing plan where you have the different branches to all the assets. And it's such a cathartic experience and a creative experience. So I understand the frustration when you get thrown off course, or if a new priority emerges to throw you off balance a little bit. But part of the power of these practices is that they allow you to be more agile and flexible in your approach. And if you, take these new approaches, embrace these new approaches, it's pretty fascinating to see where you can kind of, take yourself creatively and really get the most value out of the content you already have, or, how you can better plan and concoct your content net new, so you can get the most value out of that piece when it does go to market. So with that, again, I think this is just the first step in your journey, and we're happy to help if you have any follow-up questions or concerns, or if you have a plan in place but aren't quite sure how to get it in action. Again, we're so happy to help you. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or we'll be sure to facilitate some sort of follow-up so we can start to help you get the most value out of all of that great marketing content that you have in place. So with that, I think, Sal, we'll hand it back to you for some questions.
Well, thank you both very much. And I tell you, we got a lot of questions, Alicia, so don't have to worry about that. Great examples, great tips for folks to follow. I know a lot of folks have some questions that were coming in. Again, folks, we are at about 37 minutes now, so we're going to have a few questions. There's a bunch that came in. If we don't get to them today, the team will be following up with them, so don't worry about that, but we'll get to some right off the bat. Before I do that, though, I don't want to get in trouble with Raquel and Sherry on my team, so I'm going to remind everyone to make sure you take that survey. You can take it and look at it now if you want, or right after this session ends, it'll pop up. So please do share your insights. They are very valuable to us. So without further ado, as they say, let's get to those questions. The first one I had written down was from Doreen, actually, and she asked, what's the best way for us to break down content when a last-minute need emerges? So I'm not sure, Alicia or Tanya, who wants to take that?
I can start. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Tanya,
go ahead. Okay. Thanks, Alicia. I think with a case like this, what I like to do is look at your priorities as a marketer and then align your choices with those. If you need to get to market quickly with the content, then that's going to help to define how you break that content down. You might have a need to tell a story that needs to be in a certain type of container format, like an ebook or a quiz. So that could help define as well what choices you make. Alicia, any input?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tanya. And also, I think taking into account to the audience, I think this ties back to the reversioning point as well, because there is such rich opportunity there. So again, focus on low impact, low effort, high impact. So is it just a matter of changing some of the imagery? Is it tweaking the headlines or finding new data? Going back to your existing content and figuring out, okay, well, what can we do here to meet the need or meet the objectives of wherever that ask came from, while still, keeping our sanity and our resources in check. So I think, like Tanya alluded to, I think there are a few different ways that you can tackle it.
Yeah, agreed. And again, sometimes it's right there under our noses. So instead of going out and reinventing it, might as well repurpose or reimagine what we have already. So, all right. So the next one is from Eric. He asks, how do we get our team bought into this concept, especially when we're asking them to pivot on something new last minute?
Yeah, I think I'll start here, Tanya, and you can always chime in if I miss something. I think as far as the buy-in for a last-minute need, it's easy. Just focus on listen. Like, I know this is a last-minute thing, but here's some guidance or here are some ideas that I think we can follow in order to get this up and running quickly, or better yet, make it more of a working collaborative process where you come to the table with content that may work or align to your need. As far as, getting your team bought into just the bigger picture approach, repurposing and, modularizing content, so to speak, it does require, especially modular strategy, does require a bit more upfront planning. But I think focusing on the domino effect that comes with that, like say, listen, we really need to get everyone aligned, get our ducks in a row, develop these core storylines and break it all down. But listen, this is the plan then, and we can design our content so everything else that follows is as quick and turnkey as possible. And honestly, I don't see who wouldn't be bought into that process, right? Especially as we noted, time and resources are so strapped that going to the table knowing that it makes everyone's lives easier, I think is beneficial. Tanya, is there anything I missed?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Number one reason is it's easier.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, it's funny, the repurposing theme keeps coming up in the questions, and actually we have time for, I think, one more. So this one was from Isabella. She asked, are there any formats that don't work well for repurposing?
Yeah, I'll weigh in there, and I will say that it can be difficult to repurpose static. From interactive to static or static to interactive without recognizing that you're doing something completely different. So take into consideration that interactive assets take longer to produce. So I think it's kind of easier to almost go from static to interactive than backwards, because you can choose from a lot of stuff in a variety of static assets to put into one interactive asset, whereas one interactive asset might actually not have enough content for a single static asset.
That makes sense, because you're using the interactivity as part of the experience.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tanya. I think the one other thing that I'll chime in there, as far as what doesn't work well for repurposing, I think it's just like Tanya, you noted, just taking into account the time and work that may go into the process. So, for example, taking a webinar and turning it into an ebook. We find that a lot of folks take this approach, and it makes sense because often you'll have a client or an SME actually talking through, their story or a best practice or a process. So what better way to reuse those insights and put them in an ebook? It's just knowing that it is going to take time to, get that audio transcribed, to structure it so it's ideal for the format, and go through those review cycles and then design. So I would say that not necessarily there are certain formats that don't work for repurposing. I think it's just knowing that there may be some fluctuations in the amount of time it takes to complete and also the effort it takes to do it well. I hope that
makes sense. No, absolutely. Great insight. So, well, unfortunately, folks, we are at at the end of our time, let's say. So I really do appreciate Tanya and Alicia, your time. And again, a great session. We appreciate everyone out there in TV land for spending the time with us and joining us for today's session. I do recommend you make sure to join us for our next session, which is 3 tips to generating seamless customer experiences through conversations, which will take place tomorrow at noon Eastern time. So again, thank you all for your time and hope you enjoyed our session. Have a great day.